Computer. Hello, everybody. It's Tuesday night. It's 7 o'clock, and we are live. Hello, everybody. It's Tuesday night. It's 7 o'clock, and we are live. Welcome to V-Talks. I'm your host, Veronica Brockwell. Well, it's so fun to be back to doing the podcast. I took a little time off, and I'm really excited about 2024. The show that we have tonight is introducing one of our newest V-Talks family members, Dr. Michael Pellegrino. He is going to be with us every month talking about different issues regarding our health. And this evening, we're going to talk about 5 things we can do right now to stay healthy during this cold and flu season. So please welcome to the V-Talks emergency room physician, Dr. Michael Pellegrino.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Michael. Veronica. Welcome.
Hi. Thanks. Nice to see you.
I'm so happy to have you on. You are going to be helping our viewers so much with your knowledge, and we are going to be so much smarter after talking with you. You're like, okay. I think you're very smart.
We'll learn from each other.
You're not going to learn much from me. But anyway, so Michael, first off, I would like to hear a little bit about you so we can educate our viewers on exactly what you do.
Sure. I'm an emergency physician. I've been in this area now for about 25 to 27 years or so, actually doing emergency medicine. I've been at the South Coast system, the local hospitals here at Charlton and Toby for a long time. Boy, the years have gone by so fast. It's crazy. It's just crazy. So I know. I started in 96 at Charlton.
Yeah. 96?
Yes, 1996.
Oh my goodness. So you have had a private practice? And
I did. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I actually, when I started here in 96, I came out of residency and have been in the emergency department since then. And then sometime in the late 90s through the early 2000s, I also did some graduate work and studied medical acupuncture, some Chinese herbal medicine. And because I'm an osteopath, I kind of combined those 3 types of practices. And in addition to my full-time emergency practice, I opened up a private practice where I did those other 3, acupuncture, osteopathy, and some Chinese herbal medicine during that practice for about 5 years or so, when my kids were really tiny. And I was able to juggle both practices and spend time doing all of those things that I love doing while still pursuing and practicing my full-time emergency medicine.
So you've thrown out a couple words that some of our audience members might not know. So let's start with, what is an osteopath? Or the other word you used is osteopathy.
Right. Yeah.
Clarify that?
So medical schools physicians are typically broken apart into either allopathic or osteopathic. Mm-hmm. And allopathic are what people might typically refer to as medical doctors or MD doctors, medical doctors. And osteopathic medical schools are medical schools in all the same ways, but confer the degree of doctor of osteopathy or osteopathy and medicine. And the differences primarily revolve around all of the basic sciences, which we all have to spend those 4 years of medical school doing, but also the addition of looking at the body as an osteopath. We look at the body as a whole, and additional studies of how the body interacts and how to help the body heal itself, and examine the musculoskeletal system as to how that may play a role in maintaining health and prevention of health, and combining that with all of the typical, what you might refer to as allopathic or medical doctor type of training as well. So it's about somewhere between 200 and 800 hours of additional training in those other types of medical evaluations and care.
So in the emergency room, how would the treatment differ from?
That's a great question.
I know.
Yeah.
I just, it just came to me.
Yeah, it's a great question,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah.
So, I kind of, so most DOs will go into primary practice. Probably 50 to 60% of my class went into primary care medicine, maybe even a little bit more of those. In most osteopathic schools, 70 or 80% will go into primary care. That's pediatrics, internal medicine, family practice largely, and where they can have a much easier time spending time with patients and learning about all the aspects of their care. In the emergency department, and DOs have done all specialties, whether it's the general surgeries or plastic surgery, orthopedics, or all of the other rheumatology, pulmonology. I did emergency medicine, and my training was initially a rotating internship, which was primarily critical care, which I loved. Then I went into a surgical residency, an allopathic surgical residency for a year, and then went and did 3 more years of an allopathic emergency medicine practice, emergency medicine residency. So I did take my feelings about the holistic approach to patients, even into the emergency department. And so I like to think that when I approach patients and when I see patients, I step back and maybe generally look at those patients in a larger way and attempt to not only see what maybe necessarily their emergency may be, but also the root cause for a lot of the underlying reasons why they may really be there, or some additional confounding factors that they may be going through that ultimately led to the problem why they're there. So it's a general approach that I think I try my best to take. Now, it's notwithstanding, obviously, when the emergencies present themselves, that we have to sort of narrow down our focus and address those emergencies at hand. But in general, keeping in mind all the other aspects of the holistic approach to patients gives me maybe a slightly different advantage in some ways to keep that in my armamentarium of how to approach patients and maybe address things as we move forward, because many of my patients, thankfully, are able to go home. And if we're able to address really the root causes as to what brought them there, maybe we can keep them out from seeing me.
So, first of all, I just want to thank you for your service as an emergency room doctor. You save lives every day. You see things.
That's nice of you to say.
Well, it's true. And you see things that most of us, and experience things most of us, don't. And I want to hear in your words what a typical night in the emergency room looks like. And then how do you go home at night and kind of compartmentalize and, kind of go back to normal with all of that?
Yeah, so I am greatly privileged and blessed to do what I do. I can tell you, I have always felt this way, that it is such an incredible gift that I'm given to be able to be in an environment where people trust me with their lives immediately on the worst day of their life, right? So to be receptive to that and to acknowledge that, just that fundamental incredibleness of what that means, that trust that people put in me, that is just a beautiful thing. And the night, a day or a night or an evening in the emergency department can vary. I always say it's the most boring or the most exciting, crazy, chaotic place to work. Mm-hmm. And I can walk in on some days, on a rare occasion, where there may be 10 patients in the ER and they're stable and they're there for sniffles and colds and a couple of sprained ankles. But it can rapidly change in seconds, where the alarm for the radio goes off, 3 ambulances show up, and there can be unresponsive, seizing, bleeding, people that are overdosed, people that are having chest pain or septic, or from a variety of things, broken bones, all kinds of things can happen within a very short period of time. So it can be chaotic, and the goal is to really keep that chaos somewhat controlled, if that makes any sense, and organize it into a way where you address those super sick patients really quickly, and still make those other people that are there that are maybe less emergently sick still feel validated and feel as though they're getting the kind of care, the time that they need.
Well, and too, right? Like a lot of people that, complain about the long waits sometimes in the emergency room that maybe aren't as sick, it's because you're in life-saving mode back there a lot of times, right? Like ambulance comes in, right? And it's an emergency.
So especially as the physician inside the emergency department, often I don't see a lot of what's happening in the triage area. And we have these incredible people, these nurses and techs out there that are in security that are managing the front lines. So largely the ambulances may come into the main part of the entrance for their ambulance entrance, but a lot of that other stuff we talk about, the waiting was full of 40 or 50 people. And those triage nurses are trying to glean who are the sickest, who are needing most urgent care, who they can get back the most quickly, who needs to be seen right away. And then juxtapose that with who's coming in by ambulances on an ongoing basis as well. That's not an easy job. They are amazing, amazing people. And so you're right. The time, sometimes it can be short and sometimes they can be brought right back if those triage nurses are feeling that they need to really be seen right away. And other times that there are so many sick people that need emergent care right away. Yes, some of those other patients with less emergent issues may need to wait a bit longer.
Right. So let's kind of get to it. So what are you seeing right now in the emergency room in terms of illness?
So we're in the middle of as of right now, as far as the winter is concerned, which is, we kind of see ebbs and flows of a lot of things, but certainly during these colder months, we are seeing all the regular sniffles and colds and respiratory illnesses primarily. We certainly through October and November, end of September, October, November into December was a real ramp up of RSV or respiratory syncytial virus illnesses in a lot of people. And we kind of overlap that eventually with the flu, or what we call it commonly the flu, but it's the influenza viruses and all the categories of it. And then all the regular common cold stuff, which are obviously of thousands of varieties. So I would say that this time of year, we're still seeing a lot of the respiratory illnesses and some GI illnesses as well. But it is primarily probably 50% of all of our volume right now is of the respiratory, general body ache, flu, cold type of environment.
And we talked about this a little bit when we were prepping for the show. But are you finding that people seem to be sicker with a variety of illnesses this year over previous years? And why do you think that is?
Yeah, I think, well, there's no doubt that we're social beings. And now that we've kind of come out of this COVID atmosphere, we have let our guard down largely. And by the way, I would never suggest that we don't maintain our connectivity, our sense of socialness and wanting to be together, and that letting down of all of that after 2 years, 3 years of being masked and quarantined so much of our daily lives and separated as physical people. You can sort of see certainly the cold viruses and all of these other respiratory viruses are spread by either contact, physical contact, or by respiratory droplets, by coughing, sneezing, spreading this plume of virus-ridden respiratory excellent wherever we are. And some of those are even spread by us touching the desk we were sitting at, the doorknobs when we go in and out of our homes or our car doors or the stores and things like that. But largely they enter our body through our respiratory system or our eyes and our respiratory symptoms, our respiratory system. So if we're covered up like we have been for the past 2 years or so with masks and largely separated by distance, remember that those things alone minimize our contact, our physical contact, and it's less likely you're going to walk into Target and walk by someone who just sneezed and spread their viruses all over the place because we were so separated by all this for so long, or we had masks on. And so we had two ways of preventing ourselves from getting sick, right? Which was avoidance largely.
And a lot of people did. A lot of people avoided for years. And also, so would you say, because I am not a doctor, but would you say that because of the masks and the social distancing, that we may have weakened our immunity to things?
Yeah.
Is that a possibility?
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it, because I think, I mean, there's no doubt that we have different mechanisms to prevent ourselves from getting sick. Mm-hmm. And we just talked about two of them, right? Masks, avoidance. Mm-hmm. And so that's touching and spreading. That's whether it's you're touching your face, and masks often sometimes avoid us from touching those things. But now that we've taken our shields down a bit, whether it's by becoming closer again in more proximity, walking around Target more often, and without masks somewhat, right?
Yeah.
That for 2 years, our bodies have been less ramped up, so to speak. Our immune system has this really amazing ability to recognize these foreign bodies, these viruses, these bacteria that are all around us. It's constantly fighting and keeping us from getting sick. So if we're covered up and we're not exposed to these things over time, the memory that our immune system has against all of these viruses from past, we've had 2 years, 3 years of not having any generation of immune memory. Now we're exposed to them again, and suddenly we have a flood of these foreign viruses, these foreign invaders in our body, so to speak, where our body then is less ready, less memory, less prepared, so to speak, to then respond to them. And so there are many times where you may have been exposed to many, many illnesses. I'm sure we all have, and you never know it. Your body has fought those off and kept you from getting a fever and body aches. Maybe you felt a little tired one day, you slept a little bit late, and that's all it was.
Yeah.
But that's because of the memory that your body had, your immune system had for so long against these daily invaders that have now been less so for the past few years. So that memory is not quite as quickly triggered, and it takes a little bit more time. And then you may feel those symptoms that you may have otherwise have not. And that becomes fevers, tiredness, loginess, maybe some expressions of some more serious illnesses too.
I just came off of, I mean, and you know this, I got very sick. I haven't been sick in a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
I was sick a couple of times with COVID, like everybody else during that time, but I haven't been sick in a couple of years. And sure enough, I'm still congested. 4 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Long hauler. What's the I'm asking you, what's the long hauler one that you guys are dealing with? Because I think I'm at the end of it, but
hope that certainly for you, it's much more common. I don't know if you were actually diagnosed with the flu or COVID, but certainly
it wasn't COVID because I tested a few times.
Yeah.
At
so
home.
It's probably more likely that you had more than one cold, and the colds are typically what we call rhinoviruses. And so there are thousands of what we call serotypes. I won't get too much in the weeds about that, but it's primarily.
Please go ahead. We want to learn.
So these are colds, the regular common cold, and it's probably really why people often say, why don't we have a vaccine, so to speak, we can do vaccines to the flu, but maybe not to the common cold. But there are thousands of what I mentioned before, what are called serotypes, which are sort of the name that we give different viruses, or the protein covers on these viruses that designate them by serotype. And those proteins, there are thousands of different kinds of viruses, these rhinoviruses that are of all, and they morph, they change every week, every month. And so typically you get the cold, you may have gotten over one, and at the same time you were somewhat immune blunted because you had been stressed and sick. And then you were exposed to another one that you hadn't been exposed to before. And then you may have just been sort of just tailed on to the previous one, and then made it just worse for you. That's much more common. And especially if you don't have too many other what we call comorbidities where you are immune suppressed that may really drag on a flu or a COVID type of illness.
Right.
Most of these colds just typically get better once your body's ramped up against them, but you were probably exposed to more than one. And that's what kind of probably dragged it on for you. That's why we can do that. Why we can do vaccines to the flu, because the flu, when we say the flu, there's really many different kinds of, or several different groups of flu. We may have heard of H1N1 and there's influenza A and influenza B. And certainly the influenza A is the most common. That's the one we see probably most. And even now, when we test for the flu in the emergency department, it is the most common one that we see. And it's because of the narrow nature by which we're able to study these. And we know there's just far fewer than there are of the common cold that we can generate these vaccines, because the proteins or the serotypes of these flu viruses is much more steady throughout the year. It does mutate throughout the season, and even the flu vaccines will change based on the new serotypes of flus that are now seen. So we start off the year by looking at what flus are in the southern hemisphere, and we generate vaccines based on what we know will soon be in our hemisphere in our wintertime. And that's sort of what the CDC will say, okay, this is the flu vaccine based on what we know was happening in the summer or in the winter months of the southern hemispheres now that are going to be in our hemisphere. So we're all ramped up and ready to go. And then over the months, the flu changes again, and we kind of change the vaccines a little bit. And by then it's springtime, and then it's starting all over again. And
it starts all over again.
All over again. And that's why the colds, we can't do that, because there's just thousands of them, and there's just so many of them. It would be impossible to really develop a vaccine against them.
Well, I will say I was sick for a couple of days, like tired, and then it started to get better, and then it got worse. But what you're saying is I probably got a second one.
Right. You probably had
and that's why it got worse. It didn't get worse. I just got a worse virus or whatever.
Right. You just got it up. Yep. That's probably what happened.
Wow.
And you were already stressed out and overtired and immune compromised because you've been working so hard at fighting the first one. Just made it easier.
Yes. And working so hard at V Media. Anyway. Okay. Yeah. So let's talk about the 5 top things we can do to stay out of the ER this cold and flu season. So number 1.
So I think we mentioned some of them actually already. Kind of talked a little bit about them.
Sure.
Yeah. So I think it's probably worth mentioning or saying at least that I'm a big believer in this sort of self-intuition about knowing your body. We all sometimes can be removed from that, but knowing what you feel. If you feel tired or you're feeling a little bit different one day, not quite as hungry, you had a little bit of a headache, you had a little bit of body ache, I really encourage you to not discount that, because part of what we can do is not be around other people when we're beginning to shed these viruses. So that's your body's way of telling you likely that you probably have a cold. In fact, we're infectious the days, 1 or 2 days before we really develop a full-blown symptom of the cold or the flu. Just like chickenpox, we're spreading those viruses days before that. So if you feel that, and to answer your question, how do you stay away from me in the ER, is if you're feeling that, take heed of it and maybe stay home, sleep a little bit later, keep yourself hydrated, and let it declare itself. And your immune system may fight that off before it really becomes a full-blown illness, in which case it's shorter, you get back to work on time, and you don't have to spend the time with me in the ER. So avoidance and being acknowledging your own sense of what your body feels like, and then staying home if you're super tired and knowing that sort of thing. So that would probably be my first advice. Yeah.
Okay. And then we talked a little about some of these things. So we have the hand-mouth contact, right? So touching the face, touching the eyes.
Yeah, it's pretty common, obviously. I mean, and again, I don't want to discourage us from being human, right? This is what keeps us connected. And in fact, it's what was lost largely in COVID. People we weren't able to touch patients. And that can really wreak havoc on our psyche and ultimately our immune system as well. So there's a middle ground there where we could be careful and still be human and still take care of each other and not feel like we're lonely or we're so secluded that impacts our psychology so poorly. So I think, what we can do is we touch our eyes and our mouths so often. If you shake someone's hand, we touch the doorknobs, we scratch our nose, we touch our eyes. These are points of entry. If you can imagine, where our bodies are being bombarded by things that want to kill us basically all day long. They want to take over our bodies. And
awesome.
You don't even know that your body's fighting it, right?
No.
So that's wonderful. That's the incredibleness of our body. So
like
if we can avoid, it's a video game, right? Exactly. Yeah. So if we can avoid touching our eyes and scratching our noses, we can certainly minimize the transmission of those things that are on our hands from touching the world around us and bringing it into our body and then overwhelming our body. So avoiding touching our face and our eyes and scratching our nose, and washing our hands with soap and water and vigorously on a regular basis is a reasonable thing to do.
What are your thoughts on hand sanitizer?
I think there's a place for them. I tend to not use them. I'm not convinced when I look at the literature, I think that you can attain the same level of decreasing the viral load or the numbers of viruses or infectious agents on your hands by washing your hands under warm water with soap vigorously, as you can by putting foreign substances of detergents and anti-infective agents on your skin. Most of those are fairly safe, but again, there's a place for them. Maybe when you can't wash your hands,
right,
and you necessarily have to do something, and you have to enter a situation where you want to kill whatever's on your hands pretty regularly. But I'm not convinced that we know enough about what it is to put all of these transcutaneously absorbed solvent materials on our hands. People use these things regularly. 10, 15, 20 times a day.
Yeah.
I don't think we have enough data to say that. I'm a fan of the solution to pollution is dilution, right? So if we wash our hands all the time, we're diluting out enough of these infectious agents to make it far less likely and just about as equally as if we were to put on these other alcohol-based or other anti-infective type of hand washes. So I'm not opposed to them, but I think there's a place for them. I just like to minimize my use of them. I don't use them. I almost never use them in the ER. I have to say, I wash my hands constantly. I do use them on my stethoscope. So between every patient, I clean my stethoscope with gloves on, with a towel that has a disinfectant on it. So I clean my stethoscope between every patient, because as you can imagine, that's another way to transmit from one patient to the next, right? So I'm very careful about changing gloves, washing my hands, cleaning my stethoscope before I go on to the next patient.
And how long do these viruses, can they survive?
So
like if I'm in Stop and Shop, and that's
a great question. You're very intuitive. Yeah, you're very smart. That's a great question.
I've been doing this a long time. Stuff pops into my head. It's like the dumb stuff, right? Like that everybody else is like, what is, that's me. Like, I can talk all day long. So you're holding this, you got the shopping cart and Mr. Joe Virus is on the shopping cart, and they don't have the wipes at the Stop and Shop. How long is that virus going to be on my hands?
So like I mentioned before, so if you separate them out into two categories, and primarily there's the COVID flu viruses and the rhinoviruses, which is the category that is primarily the common cold type of viruses. And the common cold virus can actually live a long time. When we say live, by the way, viruses aren't really alive, but they are ready to jump into your body and take over your cells to reproduce. Awesome. So I consider that alive in some ways, but not the typical way we think of being alive.
Sure.
But they can live up to 24 hours or so.
Okay.
The common cold viruses can. They're typically not infectious beyond 6 hours, maybe 9 hours or so. So they can be infectious for a long time. And imagine if you're going to the shopping cart, these are minutes between people using those carts,
Oh,
right?
sure. Yeah.
So you're definitely getting them on your hands. As opposed to the flu virus can maybe only survive a couple of hours, really,
Okay.
on there. Far less in terms of the length of time that they could survive on inanimate objects, or what we call vectors.
All right. So on to the next, we have nutrition.
This is an interesting topic. And by the way, none of this is meant to cure disease, right? So this is just to maintain health and
This
to
is,
be able for us to.
yeah.
This is meant for us to be able to be healthy, to hopefully prevent disease or or at least help us feel better, so we have a less likely chance of getting sick. And I separate these out into what is truly literature based, and then which is very, very little, I have to say, when it comes to the actual literature based on nutrition. There's sort of this, it's probably the least studied, or the least clear, I should say, of the sciences in terms of what we do. Not that we can talk about why that is, and largely, and that's a different discussion, I think. But there's not a lot of what we call double-blind, placebo-controlled studies that really help us understand what truly works best. There's a lot of anecdotal experiences and a lot of things that I know help me, that I would suggest that for me, I do certain things to help keep me healthy and nutrition-wise. And nutrition, I also put in the bucket of maintaining hydration, getting good sleep, and then a few supplements that help me. I think in terms of the literature and what the research tells us, typically there's vitamin C, there's vitamin D, echinacea, all of which, by the way, there isn't really a whole lot of really, really good literature that tells us these things on a large basis help us to any large degree. I can tell you anecdotally, however, that people that have, and that for patients that I know that have adequate vitamin D levels, that have higher than typical ingestion intake of vitamin C, typically feel better, and maybe they feel as though that shortens the course of an illness they may have. Now, that may also play into the role that they are also in general healthier people, and they do things also additionally that help them get better well, or have a very strong, robust immune system. So there's a lot of nuance there, but the studies, maybe one of the few ones that actually has been shown in several reasonably good studies would be zinc, I would say. Zinc has been shown to shorten the course of some illnesses, typically by several days, and some are, and at a slightly higher level than what people might typically take it. And that is probably one of the ones that I would say would be supported by the research to a degree, that it could be suggested that if you take that along when you're feeling ill, you might shorten the course of your illness reasonably.
Omega-3 fatty acids.
So omega-3s are a little bit, those are certainly better studied. That's a broader topic than just prevention of necessarily of the illness, or keeping you out of the ER to see me. So omega-3s are a really cool subject. And there's been a lot of research, even more recently, that has really, initially it was kind of wishy-washy, and there wasn't a lot of really clear literature, but there's been some very recent studies that have expressed the reduction in all-cause mortality by people that have certain ratios of omega-3s to 6, which you can measure in your red blood cells. So there's no doubt that that after reading that literature more recently, that it really more strongly suggests that we need higher doses of that to get to higher levels of these omega-3/6 ratios. And again, that plays into being overall healthy. And people that do that typically are also exercising, sleeping well, not overeating, and not consuming excessive amounts of alcohol, and those other things that keep us in better health overall in general. But that's a good point. So the omega-3s supplementation is something I do myself, certainly. And I've measured my own levels, and I've measured my ratios, and I know what puts me where I want to be. And if you look at large populations as well, these what we so-called blue zones of levels, if you look at omega-3 levels and 6 ratios in those blue zones, or those centenarian type of those areas where people live to be in the 90s into their 100-year-old ranges or so, and what their ratios are. It's fairly clear that those ratios are pushing the limits of over 6, certainly, and certainly into the realm of 8 to 12%, even if you go to Japan and some other areas. So, and ours in the United States, typically somewhere around the level of somewhere between 2 to 4, I would say, is pretty typical for us here in the U.S. And I'll be candid, mine has been typically somewhere between 6 and 8, and that is largely because I measure it and I change and I supplement based on what I know for me and what the research has told me would be a reasonable place for me to be. And that requires actually supplementation, even though I do eat a lot of fish, a lot of fatty fish.
Right. Well, and the farmed fish doesn't have the omega-3s that the wild fish does. So that's like a whole other situation.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. And you can get your omega-3s from fish that are typically wild. So fish that are fed just like cows that are fed corn and grains.
And corn, yeah.
They don't generate the levels of omega-3s that the wild and the grass-fed animals typically do. You can also reduce your omega-6s, by the way, remember. So if you're looking for the right ratios of 3 to 6, you can reduce the inflammatory omega-6s by reducing your canola oils and your high-processed oxidized soybean oils, things that are inexpensive and very ubiquitous in our society, and stick to more of the extra virgin olive oils and avocados and things like that are macadamia nut oils. Those things that are much higher in omega-3 and 9s as opposed to the 6s.
I feel like we have a whole show. We have a whole show just on the omegas. I think we should talk about that. All right, we're gonna move on. All right, so sleep. That was a big one.
Sleep is something that I struggle with. I hope you don't mind me being candid like that either, by the way, about me bringing myself into this. I mean, these are things that
that's what we do. We trust you.
That,
if you do it,
feel it.
Yeah, if you do it, we're gonna do it.
So sleep I struggle with, and I think that there is no doubt, we know that poor sleep stresses your body in such a way that it lowers your body's ability to fight infections, whether that is, it lowers your immunity, your ability to, there's several parts to our immune system. And one of them is, we talk about the barriers, right? So our skin and our avoidance of each other, but your body also has these other ways of fighting off these invaders into our body. And the ways that we fight them off are suppressed, they're hurt, they're injured, it's much harder for our body to generate these immune responses when we have poor sleep. It also makes you cranky in the morning and during the day too. So,
and ways that we can get more sleep are number 4 here. We actually have turn off electronics, right? Yeah, so we can kind of talk about some of that.
Yeah, we're not quite approaching that yet here. So typically, and again, I don't mean to belabor the research point, but I kind of use it as a sounding board for me I don't like to necessarily apply research to any one particular person, but on a large population sense, it's nice to look at the data and understand it, and then individualize the treatment plans for any one individual. Mm-hmm. So but the research is very clear that people that are on their electronics and stimulate their eyes and their brains after the hours of 11, somewhere between 11 and 4, we know that those people have much less robust immune systems, and because of their poor sleep patterns, their cortisol levels are different. We reorganize the circadian rhythms in our brains because of these lights. And all of those things translate, by the way, into even the next days, into the next several days. So I think we don't place enough emphasis, maybe some of us don't, on the importance of sleep and getting really good, adequate sleep. And certainly suppressing our immune system is one of the things that it does to us. And then we are more susceptible to all these other colds and viruses and bacteria that we just talked about.
And in addition to that, when you're on your computer, or watching television, you've got the news, or on your computer and your phone, you've got social media. There are all of these images and triggers and things that could potentially upset you, that maybe not so relaxing,
Right.
that, emotionally it could keep you up as well, right?
Yeah. So there's more than one component to it. It's a great point. So studies typically isolate these things into one variable, but there are so many variables you may be generating, which is one of the reasons why when I come home from work, when I leave work, I sort of have not the news, but I have all of these things that have happened during the course of my shift, which could be a variety of catastrophic events, a variety of beautiful events. But it's like fireworks in my head, which often take the drive home, sitting in my car, not listening to anything other than maybe some soft music, and letting myself reacclimate to what a normal turn off the fireworks type of atmosphere, which is what you effectively do when you're watching the news or on your computer or these other events that are stimulating parts of your brain that are not meant to be stimulated at that point in the day.
Gosh, work emails. Maybe we could just go on and on and on of all the things. Just turn it all off. Just turn it all off and say, we're closed until morning.
Yeah, that'd be nice if you could just do the light switch, right?
That's right. We're closed. That's right. Exercise.
So exercise, again, I love to exercise. I've learned to not only love it, but I've learned to need it. The issue I struggle with is that I work out typically, or often my time that I can work out is later in the day or the evening, which is similar to the stimulation that your body is not really looking for to prepare itself for sleep. Lowering your body temperature in order to generate the right wavelengths and the type of circadian rhythms you need in your head and your body to really get deep, restful sleep are really hindered as you generate these high epinephrine, adrenaline, cortisol-driven, high-intensity exercises if it's too late. So exercise, it can be a wonderful boost to your immune system. And it's the research is pretty clear on this too. If you exercise typically in the morning, it's probably better for your body overall in terms of its normal rhythms of the day. If you're sick, there is some benefit, by the way, of some forms of exercise to actually boost your immune system. Now, I would suggest that the type of exercise, to be more specific about that, is the type of exercise that isn't going to be beyond the typically what we call zone 2 or zone 3 type of exercising, and usually less than an hour. So the research tells us that less than an hour, zone 2, maybe zone 3 training is actually beneficial for our body and actually stimulates our body to have a slightly higher immune response and actually help us fight off these invaders. Whereas if you go beyond that, beyond the hour with a higher intensity exercise, you actually will then suppress your immune system. So if you're feeling a little bit ill, I think exercise is not to be discounted as part of your therapy, as long as you don't go beyond that hour or go beyond that lower intensity type of exercises. So that typically means it's okay to walk, do some light exercises that will actually help your immune system even better. It may help you sleep better too if you exercise in the morning.
And, we had this discussion earlier too, that, anything is better than nothing, right? You have to start somewhere. So if you're a person that really typically isn't exercising very much, maybe sits at the desk all day, drives to work or works from home, you can start, your body's going to react to anything that you do that's more than that, right? You have
I think, you're 100% correct. I think that I always tell patients, and we talked about this before too, is even if you are not an exerciser, if we're talking about preventing us from getting sick, there isn't much that's better than moving your body. There are sleep and moving your body. You can almost eat whatever you want. I'll never suggest that, but you can almost eat whatever you want to a large degree if you can get good sleep and regularly exercise. And I just mean get up and move. I mean, go get the mail, maybe do laps. I have patients who I encourage them, they do laps around their kitchen counter. They do one lap around, and then the next time I see them, they say, I did 6 laps. I did it twice a day. Because you almost if you set your expectations reasonable, you're not going to fail. You're going to enjoy it. You'll feel better.
Right.
And you want to do more the next time. Your goal is not to be hurt, is not to injure yourself, but your goal is to slowly eke yourself into feeling better and then learning to enjoy it. And that will definitely help your immune system.
I have a question. Please give an example of what zone 2 exercise is. I should have asked that question.
Yeah. So rather than, so zone 2, there's definitions for all of these zones, so to speak. I think it's better to express that in a way that allows you to implement it in a very intuitive way. So if you can exercise, if you're exercising, walking at a pace, riding your stationary bike, doing some sort of exercise where you can speak reasonably comfortable, but you don't want to continue the conversation, that's about a zone 2. And that's about somewhere about 50% of what would be your max heart rate. If you take your max heart rate, and then you can break these down into different zones, but your rate of perceived exertion is probably your best easy way to figure out that you're in a zone 2, zone 3 range. I want to talk, I can talk, but I'm a little bit, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 words. And then I don't want to keep up talking too much longer because I'm feeling a little bit short of breath, but I can still keep it up. That's about a zone 2, zone 3. So rate of perceived exertion is probably the easiest way for most people to rather than counting a heart rate or getting a watch or calculating funny things, just do it as a rate of perceived exertion is probably the easiest way to do that.
Well, I love that too, because we all have different physical limitations because it just depends on how much we exercise, right?
Yep.
And I exercise pretty often, like pretty much every day. I just do a lot. I'm a busy person, and I like to work out anyway, but I'm just busy. I have horses and I'm always doing something. And but it was interesting because I had to climb a flight of stairs that was very, very, very steep and very fast recently, like a very steep flight. And I didn't even think anything of it. I was a little winded when I got to the top, and I thought, oh, I haven't been doing this. Like, and then, I was fine right after. I guess it's when your heart rate doesn't come down, that's when it's a problem.
So your recovery response is also very important. And it sounds like you're probably pretty good there. Even if you may not have been used to using those particular muscles at that level of exertion.
I was like, I got up and I was like, so I think I was in a zone 2 after that stair climb. So I thought that
you're probably a little higher than that, I would say. I'd probably say your heart rate probably jumped. Yeah, I would say you probably jumped up quite a bit. You probably jumped to zone 3 or 4.
Maybe I need to get a stair climber. Yeah. All right. Stay home. That's the other one.
That was we kind of talked about how to, if you're feeling like that, stay home. If you're feeling sick, don't discount that sense of intuition about being tired and feeling achy.
I have a story. I'm going to complain, but I told some of my friends this story. So, and I think this is why I got sick. I'm telling you. So before, we had social distancing and all of those things, I guess like most people, I didn't really pay too much attention if someone was sick. I wasn't even that concerned about getting sick. I don't know. I just wasn't that person. And I was grocery shopping, and this younger couple came in. So there were 2 of them. One was healthy and one was not healthy. And I was at the supplement area, just trying to stock up on some supplements. And they were looking for supplements for the girl who was extremely sick, no mask, snotty, everything else. The person with her was completely healthy. And I thought, gosh darn it, why didn't you stay in the car? You have somebody that can get this for you. and pick
If
these
you
things out for
if you were able
you.
to see the cloud around you, it just surrounded you
I
and landed on your
literally was
body.
like, oh no, but I wasn't like that before. And now, and you know what? I got sick.
Yeah. And you're
And
most infectious when you're like that.
I left the aisle because I couldn't believe she was so sick. And she was there for supplements to help her sickness.
She should have been in bed with someone else getting them for her, right?
Stay home. It's okay. She had the person with her come on. Stay home.
That's right. There you go. Point of the day.
Point of the day. Stay home. No need now. We are very understanding. We can work from home, most of us. And quite honestly, we want you to stay home now. Right?
That's
Not
right.
good. Do we want to talk? Do we want to talk vaccines at all? You had some really good points about when it's important to get vaccinated, right?
Yeah, I think that may be another reason why the past few years, while we really have been we weren't seeing as many people as with those respiratory illnesses because of our distances, but also because of everyone was very diligent about getting certainly their flu vaccines, many with their COVID vaccines. Some places required all this stuff to be able to continue to work, certainly. And vaccines, I think are largely,
touchy.
or at least,
It's a touchy
they're a
subject
bit
with
touchy,
some people.
and they can
Yeah.
be, and it depends on your comorbidities and your exposures. If you work from home and you have no comorbidities and you're relatively young, you may not need to be getting the flu vaccine or the COVID vaccine necessarily.
Sure.
And they're not without some controversy and some discussion to be had. And that's really a discussion, I think, to really have an intimate one with your physician about your comorbidities, your exposure risk, the risk of getting sick, and what that means for you as an individual.
Yeah. I mean, I think those are always, that's just a really good point to that. And then that way you're making your own decision about what you want to put in your own body.
Right. Right.
It's
a beautiful thing.
It's a beautiful thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know. I've loved having you here. This was so lovely and so wonderful. See, it's a fun show, right?
My dog didn't come in. I wanted to see your dog. I thought your dog was going to be there.
They're sleeping right now, which is wonderful.
Yeah. Does that mean they'll be awake later?
As soon as I get up off of my little chair, yes, they're going to want mommy to feed them again or something. I don't know. I try not to feed them too late, but tonight was one of those nights. All right. So to wrap this up, your advice has been amazing. I think our viewers have loved having you here. I'm so grateful that you're part of our VTalks family. I cannot wait to come up with a topic for next month. Maybe we can kind of ask our viewers what they want to ask the doctor.
That's a great idea. Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah.
It's fun, right?
Yeah, that'd be fun. I'd love to hear what they have to say, what their questions are, what they would like to hear more about.
Yes. We have a lot of, you're welcome, Cindy. We have a lot of people just saying, thank you. Yep. I had the flu. We have frustrated. I don't know. I can show you this one here. Not really questions so much, more just comments. We have a frustrated mom that has a paramedic son, and so
I have to. It's so hard. As you can imagine. Look, we all sort of get frustrated when we know there's people that are super sick that have to wait, and there's other patients that are less sick that have to wait longer. But most of those patients, the vast majority of them, have nowhere else to go. It's the worst day of their life, or they have nowhere else to go. So whether they should be using an ambulance and bringing all their family in at the same time for runny noses, maybe a little education if they had primary care doctors, and some prevention may go a long way in that regard. So I think the system is it's got several potholes in it and places we can certainly pass things up better. I kind of just try to keep seeing people and giving them what they need, without passing too much judgment on why they're there.
Exactly. I mean, we've all been in the ER where we feel terrible and all we want to do is go home and go to bed, but we just want to
Right.
make sure, but sometimes you're there for a while and it's really hard to just try and be patient, when you're feeling lousy. But
Yeah, especially when we have no room in the main part of the ER and you're out in the waiting room with other people that are coughing and sick and throwing up, and you're sort of in that space where you're spreading all those things. We try to move them out of there as best we can, and we just don't have enough room very often to do so efficiently.
So be kind to your healthcare workers. We all have to be kind to them because, you guys, no, it's true. And during COVID, you guys were in the thick of it and not knowing what was going to happen. It must have been a very scary time.
Yeah, that's another discussion that will be interesting to have about what that was like. Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to have that. All right, my friend. Well, we said we were only going to do 30 minutes if we did an hour.
Oh yeah, it's almost 8 o'clock.
I know. See, it's so easy to go an hour. I'm telling you. All right. Well, we'll go through all the pages later and answer any questions that we need to. Oh, this is nice. We have Charlie Bell here. Many thanks. I don't have my glasses on. Can you read that?
Yeah.
Oh, you want to read it to me? I'm not kidding. I can't see it.
You really need your glasses for that?
I do.
Try squinting like this.
It's so bad now. I think I need to go back to the eye doctor and change my prescription anyway. 3 days of rest, except for the daily 45-minute dog walks.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Dogs and walking. It's perfect. What better is our life than that?
I know. All right, my friend, I'm going to take you out of the stream and we're going to wrap this up. But
thank you very much.
We'll chat soon. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Thanks. Take care.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to V Talks and giving such a warm welcome to Dr. Michael Pellegrino. He's going to be back every single month. And we'll have a new topic. And if you can think of anything, please message me. Anything you want to ask him, any topics you're interested in. Great guy. And I'm really glad to have him. We will be back next Tuesday night with the lovely ladies from Seahorse Behavioral, Breon Linkamp and Hannah Chapman for our annual Galentine's show. I believe we even have a sponsor for that one, and we're giving away some prizes. So I'll have more information for you about that soon. All right, everybody, I'm gonna sign off now. Have a good evening and thank you.